Greetings my fellow freaks and weirdos, I'm Tom and welcome to Monster Gab, where we love to talk about classic and vintage horror, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about Tyburn horror movies. Within the last 12 months, I've talked about Hammer, Amicus and Tigon horror movies. Check them out if you haven't already, links in the description. Hammer, Amicus and Tigon are all British film companies mostly recognised for their horror movies between the 1950s to the 1970s. They all shared a similar style visually and atmospherically, even casting some of the same actors too. In my top 10 Tigon horror movies video, I received a couple of comments, thanks for those by the way, mentioning Tyburn horror movies. How Tyburn sounds similar to Tigon, and how easy it is to get the two mixed up. Understandable too, as Tyburn were also a British film company with a very similar style of horror movie making. So who the hell are Tyburn? Well, like I said, Tyburn were a British film company founded by movie producer Kevin Francis, the son of Freddie Francis, you know, cinematographer and director, mostly recognised for his horror movies, especially those of Hammer and Amicus. Tyburn attempted to be a successor of Hammer, but unfortunately only ever produced 3 theatrical movies. However, they are all horror movies, so we're going to cover them right here in this video. Persecution, also known as Sheba, The Terror of Sheba, or The Graveyard, released in 1974. This is often listed as a psychological horror movie. I'd argue it's more of a psychological thriller myself, until the movie's climax, which builds up to a horror-style ending. A young boy called David is forever tormented by his cat-obsessed mother, played by Lana Turner. Now married and fathered a child of his own, David has carried the torment on his shoulders right into adulthood, where he is played by Ralph Bates, and returns to his family home to find he is still under his mother's influence and cannot fight her wicked mannerisms. That is until more background story is revealed, tragic events take place, and an unhinged David reacts to the release of his inner bottled up emotions. This is a weird one, and the story doesn't do a great job of explaining things in my opinion. It explains David's mother's past events and relationships, and reveals why she is the way she is. David's mother is played by Lana Turner, and though she herself didn't like the movie apparently, I thought she was brilliant in it. Her character is hilariously insufferable. Then there's this whole thing about who David's real father is. I like to think I follow movies pretty well and have a good attention span, but I've seen this movie twice recently and I still don't know who David's father really is. Maybe it's just me, but if somebody could explain it to me in the comments, I'd really appreciate it. The movie also tries to portray David's mother as the baddie, and David is simply just a victim of torment. And he is. And I get the impression that the audience is expected to root for him and that his actions are merely that of justice and revenge. However, this isn't a spoiler by the way, as it happens right at the beginning of the movie. We witness David as a child murder a cat by drowning it in a saucer of milk. And it's pretty nasty too. It's then made out as an evil act that his mother makes him bury it. Now, I don't have kids, maybe parents will disagree with me on this one, but I think that's a fitting punishment. I mean, if anyone intentionally killed my cat, you better believe that you're going to bury it and I'm going to watch you do it. Okay, I mean, how David's mother goes about it is a bit cynical. She places the cat in a little coffin, then wraps it up as a Christmas gift for David to open up on Christmas morning so he can bury it in a grave on the grounds of their home. But I don't know, I still feel like David's the bigger a**hole in this scenario. As an adult, David also cheats on his wife. Granted, this is plotted by his mother, who pays a woman to seduce David in order to ruin his marriage. But David is a grown man, and he takes little to no convincing at all to jump in bed with this woman. And I've left a lot of the story out of the synopsis. Let's just say that his wife is in a very vulnerable state of mind while this is happening, and she is literally under the same roof. Then, at the end of the movie, a scene between David and his mother, we see what's meant to be a result of torment, perhaps some justification. But to me, it comes across as a young man who is tormenting a crippled elderly lady with serious mental health issues. With that, I genuinely struggle to determine who the real baddie is in this movie. Maybe they both are, or maybe that's the movie's intention too, and it's just gone over my head. I've been a bit negative towards this movie, and I will add that it was a flop, a complete failure, and critics hated it. Regardless of my negativity though, I don't think this is a bad movie. I would even go as far as saying it's quite good. It's not great, it definitely has its flaws, and it's difficult to recommend, as I can see why people wouldn't like this movie. But overall, I don't think it's bad, and I actually enjoyed it. The acting by Lana Turner and Ralph Bates is pretty decent, and they have an unusual on-screen chemistry. Oh, but if you do decide to watch Persecution, just prepare yourself for a full rendition of Gudkin Wenceslas in its entirety during the opening credits. I swear it just goes on forever. The Ghoul, 1975. Not to be mistaken with the 1933 film of the same title which starred Boris Karloff, this one stars Peter Cushing, John Hurt and Veronica Carlson. During a party in 1920s England, 4 friends in teams of 2 decide to have a motorcar race to Land's End when one of the teams, Billy and Daphne, run out of fuel and are stranded. Billy goes to get help but takes too long, so Daphne, played by Veronica Carlson, decides to search for him, only to stumble upon a great mansion, the home of Mr. Lawrence, played by Peter Cushing, once a clergyman who has lost his faith and keeps some sinister skeletons in his closet, is also the employer of a brutally violent groundskeeper played by John Hurt, who together make it clear that Daphne won't be leaving anytime soon. I saw this movie a couple of times a few years back and really didn't like it. It's a very slow-paced movie with not much going on until the ending where all is explained. And though it stars the ever-brilliant Peter Cushing, even his high standard of acting couldn't save it for me. However, I watched it again for the sake of making this video and found myself really enjoying it. Maybe it's because I approached this movie knowing what to expect. I began to appreciate it for what it was. I still think the plot and the story is basic and the ending is dull, but I generally like slow burners, and preparing for the fact that this is just that, I took a lot more from this movie watching it again. It's quite atmospheric, especially as there's lots of fog and mist in the outside air, and there's tension between the characters and their conversations. Daphne is clearly being held hostage in what I would call a soft kidnapping. Mr. Lawrence insists that it's too dangerous for her to venture out into the fog, and therefore prepares a room for Daphne. He's charismatic, well-spoken and well-mannered, making out that he's simply just being a kind host. Daphne converses with the same etiquette, and though it's obvious to the audience that she's trying to leave and he's trying to prevent her from doing so, it's all done in this aura of politeness. Neither wants to give up the game of revealing their true intentions, and so it's almost like watching a battle of wits or a mental game of chess. Genuinely, I found this to be quite fascinating. And of course, everything is so old-fashioned and aristocratic, a trend with these classic British horror films. John Hurt's character is a gruff, heavy-handed groundskeeper, which brings a little bit of action and violence to the horror elements of this movie. And it's needed too, because the movie is simply building up to this big reveal ending, which isn't so big and is a little underwhelming. I won't spoil it, of course, but with that in mind, it actually helps me to appreciate the rest of the movie, and as a result, I actually like The Ghoul. It is still a tough one to recommend, but personally, I do think it's good. Legend of the Werewolf, also 1975. In the 19th century, a mother dies giving birth to a baby boy at midnight on Christmas Eve. Both she and the father are eaten by a pack of wolves who raise the boy as one of their own due to his holy-like birth, I guess. He becomes a feral wolf boy and is later discovered by a travelling circus who decide to keep him and feature him as their main attraction. Eventually he grows to be a young man played by David Rintoul, but during the light of a full moon turns into a vicious werewolf and attacks one of the other circus members. Forced to flee, he arrives at Paris and gets a job working for a zookeeper. I'm not making this up. A zookeeper played by Ron Moody, no less. Our Wolfman zoo assistant soon meets and falls for a girl called Christine, played by Lynn Dolby, but is upset to learn she's a sex worker in a brothel. During each full moon, when he turns into a werewolf, he murders all of the wealthy aristocratic clients who attend the brothel, which sparks fear in the streets and an investigation to find out who the killer is. This movie plays out like a mystery film, where the mystery only really applies to the characters, as the audience already know who the killer is. Spoiler alert, it's the werewolf. But it's still pretty fun to watch it unfold though. Peter Cushing is also in this one and plays a coroner, a skilled forensic pathologist, but can't resist playing detective and getting heavily involved in the investigation. As always, he's really good in this movie and enjoyable to watch. But my favourite character has to be the zookeeper, played by Ron Moody. Mostly known for his role as Fagin in Oliver, he pretty much brings the same essence here in Legend of the Werewolf. Though he doesn't particularly do or say much that's funny, he's still the comic relief in this movie. There's just something about his mannerisms. I also love that he's an East End Cockney Londoner. This movie takes place in France. The characters speak English for the benefit of English-speaking audiences, but we're supposed to imagine they're actually speaking French. But the zookeeper's all like, "Morning ladies, 15 admission, 30 for anyone else, mind how you go, beep beep." I'm sorry, that's a terrible impression, but what part of France is this guy supposed to be from? Oh, I don't know. The character arc of our Wolfman, also known as Etoile, is interesting. Going from feral boy to circus attraction to zookeeper's assistant is original, I suppose. And though the scenes where he travels with the circus are brief, we get to meet other interesting and humorous characters too. The werewolf makeup effects are pretty good, if not reminiscent of Hammer's Curse of the Werewolf, but I like it. There's some good POV shots too with red filter where we get to see through the eyes of an enraged werewolf. I genuinely do like this one, and it's one I can recommend if you're a lover of Hammer-style horror movies. Tyburn did make a couple of movies made simply for television. The Masks of Death, which is a mystery thriller based around the character of Sherlock Holmes. There was also a movie called Murder Elite, which is supposedly a British slasher horror film. I've not seen it myself, but I'd like to. However, it doesn't appear to be available to purchase, stream or rent, legitimately anyway. If anyone could help me out with that, I'd be much obliged. I'd like to see it. And that's it. So what happened to Tyburn? Why didn't they make any more movies? Well, there are plenty of fans, like me, who love this style of horror movie, but Tyburn arrived at a time where the trend was dying out. Hammer, Amicus and Tigon were starting to fizzle out and had their time. Tyburn was a little late to the party and audiences had simply moved on. Hey horror fans, this video is sponsored by Zealous Rebellious Clothing, based in North Wales with various designs and styles, inspired by pursuits of passion, classic cars and staying true to yourself. Be different, be rebellious. Zealous Rebellious Clothing. Now, if you were to search for yourself online, you may find the movie Tales That Witness Madness from 1973 is often listed as a Tyburn movie. My understanding is it's not a Tyburn movie, hence why I've not covered it in this video, but I'm sure if I'm wrong, you guys will let me know in the comments section. Anyway folks, we've come to the end of the video. Have you seen any of these movies? Are you familiar with Tyburn? And if you have, what did you think of them? I'd be really interested to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments section. If you haven't seen any of these movies or you're willing to check them out now you've seen this review, once again, talk to me folks, I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, that's all we've got time for in this video, and until next time. I don't know who they are, but if you don't subscribe, they will get you. So make sure you are indeed subscribed, click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new video here on Monster Gab. Like the video if you did indeed like it, share with your friends, leave that comment down there, and thank you so much for stopping by. Take care, see you soon, bye bye.